So I saw this story yesterday, and it was celebrated. It was celebrated all over the media. No context, just congrats, this is great. Minkah Fitzpatrick is now the highest paid safety in the NFL in the history, a position that doesn't nor shouldn't be paid a lot. He's a very good player. But everybody's like, yeah, he got his money. And I thought, Pittsburgh's getting into an interesting place. They have a great history, but almost none of it in the last 12 years. Their biggest rivals in the AFC all have better quarterbacks now than they do. They have a defensive coach in clearly an offensive league. And after the Minkah Fitzpatrick signing, the Steelers now have the most expensive defense in the NFL, number 1, and the least money in the NFL invested in offense, number 32. That ain't great in 2022. The standard in Pittsburgh used to be winning Super Bowls. You know what they brag about now? Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. I mean, that's not negative, but that's something like the Browns would be happy with. I mean, seriously, take it to college football. Would Ohio State ever brag about, our coach has never had a losing season? It's kind of the standard. I mean, when you're in a division for years with the lowly Bengals and Browns, you should be 4-0 against those two. The last 2 playoff games Pittsburgh has been in, they have trailed in both at one point by 28 points, 4 touchdowns. I mean, I'm all for giving TJ Watt as much as he wants. He is insane. And there's a handful of defensive players. Aaron Donald, show him the bag. But a star safety, the Steelers' defense last year was ranked 24th. Pass rush, anchored by TJ Watt, exceptional. But it was 24th. I'd scale back on the big raises for the defensive guys not named TJ Watt. Again, what is the standard? I got nothing against Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a very good player. But they're starting to feel like the Seahawks a little bit. They don't have nearly as good a quarterback as other people in their division. Seattle doesn't. I mean, what if Trey Lance is good? Then it's Stafford, Kyler Murray, and Trey Lance. And you got Drew Lock. Defensive coach like the Seahawks. Haven't had any real success in a long time in the playoffs. And you pay a lot of money to safeties, and your defense has been getting worse for years. I know we all like to celebrate athletes getting money, and I'm all for athletes getting money. And Minkah's fantastic. I love the trade. He's a playmaker, and you had to pay him something. I get it. But the standard in Pittsburgh, I don't know, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, my entire life was like Super Bowls, and not just getting to them. I mean, ask yourself as a Steeler fan, when they got to the Super Bowl and lost to Green Bay, did you go out and party that night? Was that a big night for you in Pittsburgh? No, it's just Steelers. Steelers don't lose Super Bowls. They get to them against Arizona and win. They get to them all sorts of times with Terry Bradshaw and win. They got to one with Big Ben and Seattle and won. What's the standard? I don't know. It feels like to me a defensive coach, 32nd in offensive spending, first in defensive spending. That is not a place I'd want to be in 2022 and going forward. I think we've all kind of sensed this with Tom, is that, he was Mr. Focus, Mr. Intense. Literally he'd take footballs and invite teammates with a supermodel wife the minute he won a Super Bowl down to Costa Rica. Like that is obsessed. I think Russell Wilson now to me is the only athlete in America. He's moved to the obsessed list. Total focused all the time, 24/7. Russell Wilson said during the time he broke his finger, he was rehabbing 19 hours a day. That is beyond even a driven, focused athlete. And after he won his first Super Bowl with Tampa, I've never felt it's the same. And it always comes back to this. 3 words. Something to prove. It's not money. It's not fame. After he won without Belichick, he was already the GOAT. We already said that. We spoke that into existence. He played that into existence. He's happily married, great family, rich, won. But he always had to prove something. It wasn't Belichick. It was me. So when he won in Tampa, did you notice last year he didn't bark as much? He didn't complain as much. You and I knew he wasn't happy around Thanksgiving. Joy and I talked about this on the show. It's like you can tell he's not really happy, but he wasn't as angry. He wasn't as pointed. Some of it festered. Nothing ever with Brady festers, ever in New England, ever in the first year. Something to prove. I saw this with LeBron James. After he won in the bubble in Los Angeles, he had nothing to prove. He loses, the next year to Phoenix in the playoffs. In the locker room after the playoff loss, he's like, I can't wait for Space Jam. Can you imagine him saying that 9 years ago? I mean, he would literally drive from the locker room home and start working out for the next season. And I think something to prove is a big deal. Now, Aaron Rodgers, after he won a Super Bowl, said, is this all there is? So for Aaron, it's not a knock on Aaron. After he won the Super Bowl, maybe Aaron's never quite been the same. What does he have to prove? I mean, he doesn't have the family dynamic, but he's like rich and happy, and he won a Super Bowl. And Aaron said at the time, all right, is that it? And I do think winning in L.A. and winning in Tampa, you're just out of the something to prove arena. And there's a story that's been fairly well documented by people I trust that Tom was ready to move into ownership last year. And it's one of the reasons I don't like Tampa this year, is that I don't think they're talented enough to not be focused. Because I still think the Rams want to prove it wasn't a one-off. I think McVay's got stuff to prove. I think he's got stuff to prove in division against Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, who had his number. I think Stafford wants to prove. A lot of guys have won one Super Bowl. Very few, two or more. All those losing seasons in Detroit, Matt Stafford's guy, one Super Bowl is not enough for me. And so I do think, I think that 3 words, something to prove, and it's an incredibly, it's not a criticism at all. It's absolutely healthy. I mean, what do you need now? I don't think Tom needs anything. And the fact that he can self-reflect and go, yeah, folks, he really, if he had the perfect scenario, would have been in Miami now in the ownership space. That's where he wants to be. Not as much on football, which you can't even think about 5 years ago. Forget 10. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.